Welcome. Welcome to country. Welcome to this country. Country of the Mohanenana people. The Mohanenana people who have met here on this spot. On this spot, the Mohanenana people lived in harmony with the land for more than 42,000 years. We learn with the children of the Mohanenana people, and we share country with this place between two small rivers, rivers that flow to the great river. This land, this place, and this spot, and we thank the Mohanenana people for sharing this country. And together we will continue to care for country and its people.
Hello, kia ora. Welcome to Baha'i on Air. Today we are in Hobart in Tasmania, and we have a very special guest for you, Professor Dahl, who's here for a Baha'i conference on ethics and the environment. So welcome, Dr. Dahl.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you said that your profession at the moment, you've retired, but you're still feeding into a lot of different organisations and professional networks and things.
I've also been coordinating an expert group on international environmental governance, advising the Rio +20 conference next year and the United Nations Environment Programme with points of view of all of civil society, from business and labour, from indigenous peoples, women and youth groups, farmers, scientists. All have named experts to this group to advise on where to go next in solving some of the global management problems we have for the environment.
It sounds like it's not just for the environment, it's also how our societies are so intrinsically linked with our environment, isn't it?
Well, it's all about sustainable development, sustainability, which means how does the environment sets the framework of what we can and cannot do at the planetary level, within which our society must evolve, our economy must meet our needs, our social problems must be addressed. So all that together is part of sustainability.
I wanted to ask a bit about what your perspective is on climate change. And do you think, is climate change really happening?
Well, I'm a biologist. I mean, I've worked for 50 years in biology, and just since I began doing research 50 years ago, I've seen enormous changes in biological communities. I was raised on the California coast. Species that used to occur in Mexico are now found around San Francisco. Species that are now going up north where it's cooler, and working on coral reefs. We've seen enormous changes in coral reefs with bleaching, with other things taking place. So already biologicals are responding to the climate is already changing. It's happening. In the Arctic, I haven't worked in the Arctic, but I've followed the data because working in the United Nations, I had to follow data all around the world of what's happening. The Arctic Ocean's ice is melting so rapidly. The head of the Canadian Ice Service, we had a meeting in the forum in Canada 4 years ago, and he said he was shocked and stunned. This is his official government press release with what happened when 23% of Arctic ice melted in one summer. And it's been going on this year. It's been just as bad, but it's getting thinner and thinner. We could see an ice-free Arctic by 2030 or even earlier. So this is not simply some hypothesis of some future projection. The planet is already changing very quickly, and it's going to bring enormous consequences. One that people haven't thought about so much, and that is migrations. People are going to have to move around the world. As hundreds of millions of people are displaced, as sea level rises, everybody living in coastal areas is going to have to move. Where are they going to go? Where is there water and land and food for them to live? How do we arrange for those movements? Nobody's thought about this yet. We will need to have some kind of an international organization for migration. Well, that one exists, but it only deals with political refugees. We need to strengthen that mechanism so we can lower immigration barriers, allocate migrants equitably among countries, assist in their resettlement. There are a whole set of challenges that are coming as the populations are mixed around the world in new ways. The Pacific Islands already see it happening. Tuvalu has had enormous water shortages, salt water entering into their water supplies, rainfall patterns are changing, and more than 100 million people live at less than 1 meter above sea level. Now they're now projecting sea level rise of 1 to 2 meters in this century, and it will keep rising after that. And therefore, where are the people going to go? Nobody's thought about the receiving communities. People are afraid of too many immigrants. There's been a reaction, xenophobia and so on. How do you build communities of diverse kinds of people? And the kinds of activities the Baha'is are doing at the local level, with children, with the youth, in their communities, to say, how do we solve our local problems? How do we address the social problems, the economic problems, the spiritual problems in the community? These are the tools that we need to address that kind of problem coming from climate change.
You're saying that there's a hopeful message and that there's things that individuals and communities can do?
Well, at many levels. Certainly, the only way to stop climate change is to leave the carbon in the ground. We're upsetting hundreds of millions of years of creating an atmosphere suitable for life that was done in the early history of this planet by, in 200 years, ignoring out of the ground much of the carbon that was safely stored away to create an atmosphere with less carbon dioxide, therefore less heating, and more oxygen for animals to live in. At the individual level, we say, how can I live a low-carbon lifestyle? What can I do to change my way of living, insulate my house better, heat it differently, use less air conditioning, maybe change from a vehicle that burns lots of fuel to one that burns less or none at all, and they're gradually coming out, or to a bicycle, or to walking, moving close to my work. There are many ways that people can change their own lifestyle to stop contributing to the problem. Then in our communities, helping others to change, we need to restructure our communities to be more adapted to the renewable energy sources that are the energy of the future, and gradually moving in that direction.
You were saying as well that the Baha'i community is doing a certain kinds of things to help contribute to the changes, but it sounds like what you've just described are physical changes and things that we can do in our practical ways around in our lives. But what are some of those, I guess, maybe ethical changes and spiritual changes that we can also try and adopt that you were saying?
Clearly one, simply recognizing that many people are going to be forced to move because of the changes that are coming. So we say, how can we become more welcoming in our communities? How to prepare ourselves for those people who've had their roots pulled up? I mean, I've even thought, for instance, should we allow, say, a whole village move as a village? Instead of taking individually a few go here and there, can they move with their social relationships, with their chiefly government, with their culture? Can we accept them as a community and help them to preserve some of their own traditional richness, even if they're displaced to some other location? And we need institutions internationally to manage that process. We'll need to have a process of international governance to lower immigration barriers, to facilitate these movements to places where there are resources for them. So we need to respond internationally, we need to respond nationally and locally in terms of changing our own attitudes, our thinking about people coming into our community and saying, well, they have something to give us. Many communities are, of course, in New Zealand and Australia, apart from the Aborigines and the Maoris, everybody else is an immigrant. We're immigrant communities. This is going to enrich us. It's going to bring new qualities into our cultures, our societies. We should be learning from that and appreciate that rather than seeing it as something that is somehow threatening to us. And that requires an ethical, spiritual change as well as a material change.